Now I'm under pressure with time. I don't know. I'm usually quite, I take my time and I go for my slides. I'm not sure how I'll manage this, but I'm lucky that Ian was before me and I think gave a lot of the background information that's necessary to kind of understand what I'm saying. Never mind the accent. And that. We'll try and keep myself calm and steady to make sure you understand what I'm saying. But really, we've been commissioned by the Dingle Hub, a sustainable energy community based in Dingle, obviously, to look at the feasibility of anaerobic digestion at community level in Dingle. We've started the work, let's say earlier this summer, and we're pretty much on target, and we hope to finish the project in February, March of next year. The project has been funded by Gas Network Ireland, thank you very much, Ian, and the LECO project by Udoras na Gaeltach. So that's for an introduction. You have heard and seen what AD is about, so I will skip that slide if you don't mind. I suppose what's worth emphasizing is that AD is the integrated energy system by excellence, in that the fuel can be used for heat transport and electricity generation. It fits very well within the circular economy of organic waste management, and it's also very local, and it can serve local energy needs as well. And very importantly for the group in Dingle, it is agricultural based, and therefore there's a lot of potentials to address a lot of the challenges within the agricultural sector. So let's get into the subject matter in itself. The first step we did, so typically when we get involved in that kind of project, we start with a holistic approach. Where is the energy demand? How much is used for what, and how much does it cost? Then let's look at the resources available within a territory rather than zooming straight into a potential project at a given location. And that's what we started with. Let's look at what feedstocks are available within the peninsula that can be used for anaerobic digestion. In that process of investigation, we started our engagement process with the local community and farmers in particular, who were the key stakeholders when it comes to the feedstocks. And we conducted a limited number of surveys among farmers in the area to understand the potential, but also their attitudes towards anaerobic digestion. We had the first stakeholder workshop in May, and we also presented and participated to the Farmers Forum in Dingle earlier this autumn. The key learnings from that engagement and consultation processes are, you'll be familiar with those thematics. There's a real issue with income in farming, and especially around beef farming. And there is another issue, which is the age profile of the farming community. A lot of them are at retirement age, really kind of are stuck, would love to take time off and enjoy their golden years, and that's not easy. At the other end of the scale of the age profile, young people are leaving the community, and there's a brain drain issue going on there. There's obviously a real concern around climate action and really a commitment to address it, and also the kind of high dependency of the local economy on tourism, which makes it quite vulnerable in terms of changes, for example, in the price of oil, and related to, you need to bring all these people to Dingle to get the economy going. So there are kind of challenges there. And on the other hand, the key things that we were told should be key principles in devising that or developing the vision and the kind of projects that would benefit the local economy. Well, obviously, it needs to maximize the economic benefits should be maximized for the local community. And the community ownership model that's been well discussed today, and it's very encouraging to see that the policy framework is going in that direction, should be central to the kind of project model, the business model that we need to look at. And that the biogas is produced locally using local resources for local energy needs, as opposed to being exported for grid injection somewhere else, for example. And that it participates to circular economy, including around tourism, and drives innovation locally. Again, bringing younger people back to the locality, and give them stuck in interesting projects, So in terms of the numbers and the potential for the feedstock, we primarily looked at silage, grass silage. We then looked at slurry from cattle, and we also looked at different ranges of organic waste, food waste, food industry waste, wastewater treatment waste, etc. And we took different assumptions as to where the potential might lie, and we looked at, in terms of silage, increasing the production of silage from the current level of, let's say, anything between 5 and 8 tons of dry matter per hectare, up to 10 tons per dry matter per hectare. So that's around improvement in grass management and fertilization, etc. Also, that's an element of the existing permanent pasture can be turned to silage production, again by improving the land and grass management, and also considering the challenges that are in the bee farming sector, that farm enterprise would move from dry cattle to producing silage for biogas generation. And we took a broad assumption of 30% of the permanent pasture moving towards that silage production for biogas. As I said, we looked at a number of other feedstocks, and the graph on the right gives you a snapshot of what's there. And you know, the numbers in themselves might not say much, but what's very interesting is that the food wastes, etc., are quite minor, and slurry is also very minor compared to the potential for grass silage. So inevitably, if you want to do anything of scale, silage will have to be part of the picture, and that brings in issues around cost and logistics, etc. But it's also a very good feedstock for anaerobic digestion. The other element of, you can't see it here, but what was interesting is that that column, that amount of potential feedstock in energy terms, is very similar to what the overall energy consumption is within the peninsula. Obviously, there's conversion efficiencies, etc., but considering biogas essentially can meet a significant amount of the local energy demand. So then the next step was to look at the different pathways. So Ian gave you a very good illustration of what their thinking is around how do you produce the gas, how do you convert it into something that can be burnt effectively to either produce electricity, heat, or transport. And the big focus is on compressed biomethane for, let's say, transport purposes or grid injection. So we looked at the full picture, the full spectrum, and we broke down this kind of overall schematic into pieces that are relevant to what could happen there. And from my feeling from Ian's presentation is that it's highly complex. There's a lot of things to consider along the value chain. There's a lot of constraints, etc. And you think it's complex and difficult to make projects work at the kind of scale it's thinking about. Imagine the challenge when you reduce it by 2 or 3 in terms of not having those economies of scale, and also considering that there is no grid injection point anywhere near the peninsula. And looking at all those challenges, our job is to try and find something a breakthrough in all that. And it's not easy, but when it's not easy, it gets the creative juices going. And we think, slowly but surely we'll find something. And just to illustrate where we are now, we're looking at, let's say, relatively small scale using farm-based products. So again, silage and slurry. And at the end of the scale, using food waste, which brings in, or let's say organic waste, which require pasteurization. There's a fairly heavy regulatory environment to do that. And so you're kind of looking at different technologies and different scale as well. And within that, we're looking at producing, a relatively standard type of model where you produce biogas that's used in a combined heat and power engine, produce electricity and heat, or you upgrade the biogas to compressed biomethane, which can be exported either for grid injection or used locally in, let's say, boilers or CHP units in, for example, the local hotel. And then the other one is where, in addition to, let's say, the biogas to biomethane plant, you have your own CHP. The process requires a lot of heat and electricity, and therefore it makes sense to use some of the biogas to produce that energy locally. So that's kind of the range of options we looked at, and we started looking at the economics of it all. looking at the life cycle costs and do kind of profit and loss or a balance sheet for the systems. And that's where we're at now, pretty much. We're looking at different pathways, and I'm trying to define what will work. If you look at the bottom line here, the operation balance is in most cases very difficult. It's negative, basically, and I would argue at this stage we're refining that analysis and finding more and more information. In terms of costs, for example, we're getting a better understanding of the constraints of the animal byproduct regulation in terms of treatments, in terms of costs that go with that. And we're finding that is actually quite let's say, a rosy picture of what it could be. So we're now trying to say, okay, how do we find other revenue streams that can come from this type of project, considering the circular economy elements that we've discussed before. And within that, we feel that, for example, CO2 recovery for the process of production of biomethane, which would now allow separating the CO2 and liquefying it as a byproduct, that's very, very valuable for example, the food industry, growing greenhouses, for example, refrigeration installation, the food and beverage industry, so the houses all are significant users of CO2, and that can be an interesting extra revenue stream for the project. The other thing we're looking at is, for example, using biochar, so using, let's say, the solid fraction of the digesters outside, that comes out of the plant, and treating that through pyrolysis. And turning in that, let's say, organic matter into biochar, which has a lot of very interesting uses in terms of carbon sequestration, first of all, but also as really useful benefits for animal husbandry, and is a fantastic soil amendment sources as well. So, that has inevitably a value. There isn't really a market yet in Ireland for this, but that will come in time. So we need to think through, how do we develop a project and plan for the project in a way that will allow this to happen down the road when the market becomes available, or it can be piloted in Dingle. The other piece is the local ownership. Like, finance is a big issue. These are, multi-million projects, and the cost of finance has a big bearing on the economics of the project. So obviously, grants and other incentives of that nature will be much welcome and necessary for this kind of project, but there's other models rather than your money sitting in a savings account and doing very little. This is an opportunity to invest in your local community and improve your return on investment from your placement. And so we're thinking around the lines of creating a Dingle Energy Bond for local shareholders with backing by larger guarantors. And I think something that is along the lines of what you're thinking for the RESS, etc. And so we're bringing that into the picture and seeing can that help bridge the gap, as mentioned before. I should mention, within that kind of holistic approach, we're conducting a spatial analysis for the let's say, biogas within the area, trying to understand what are the suitable locations for projects, so that down the road we can start engaging the community to understand with them and develop the potential projects at specific locations and engage with them on that front. So Sarah Kandras, you've heard her asking question earlier, is our partner on the project, and she's the GIS expert that's developed the spatial multi-criteria analysis, and she's looked at all the key parameters and constraints and factors that need to be considered to identify where is it possible to install such a system, and that's the result of our analysis. I won't go into the detail, but that's very powerful in starting to understand where do we need to go, where is the energy demand, for example, where are the no-go areas in terms of proximity to urban areas or special areas of conservation, and all these factors that need to be considered. Instead of talking hypothetically as a potential project somewhere, this makes this much more real and enables us to really zoom in on specific areas and identify where the constraints are and what kind of locations would provide maximal benefits for the project and the local community. So we're kind of moving on with the study, and we're looking at the next steps, and we're kind of zooming on what are the best path, what's the best pathway, and elaborating on that. And we're in the process of doing a preliminary design for the plant and getting costings, and so we can refine our life cycle cost analysis, and you know, we will be going through pretty much finishing that in the next few weeks. And the next step will be to look at the community ownership model and to develop a roadmap for developing this kind of project within Dingle. So sorry, this is a bit rushed, but I think it gives you a flavor. Come back to us. And Deirdre from the Dingle Hub was here today if you want to find out more. Thanks for your attention.